Ba 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 ba. Here we are. How you guys all doing today? Not gonna lie, man. These weeks, as things are accelerating and escalating in the United States, it is taking a toll on my mental health. For sure. It is taking an absolute toll on my mental health. Thankful Thursday to all. Thank you, Peanut Butter Beatrice. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, it's. I feel like this last week I've been doing a lot of like mental health work. And Austin, good to see you. How's it going, comrade? I left the RCP and now working with the Communist Party of Canada. Good for you, mate. I can't get the Communist Party of Canada to talk to me. I don't know why. I've sent emails and I just never hear back from them. So I don't really get it. I'm trying to find an organization to call my home, right? But it just never seems to. I just never seem to find pay dirt. Like, and the Trotskyists are like, the moment you start talking to them about anything serious, they just become kind of unhinged. So it's just like, okay, we can't really have a serious conversation with these guys. So it's demoralizing. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel these days. I feel demoralized. I'm gonna open up with a song here. Trying your best in a whirlwind, living life in a world of sin. Keep your head down and wash those marble floors. I'm gonna start again. I'm trying to get lower in my register. I did some recording of my higher register and I was unsatisfied with it. So hold on, let's start again. Living life in a whirlwind, trying your best in a land of sin. Keep your head down and wash those marble floors. Standing straight in a hurricane. If you smile real big, they won't see your pain. You want a bite to eat, you better keep up the show. And it falls to rack and ruin, 'cause God is coming soon. Yeah. They'll send your kids to Epstein Isle, say they're better than you with a great big smile. They'll bleed you out till you're just skin and bone. Took out their heart, replaced it with tin, sent the angels away, let the demons in, put a price tag on your everlasting soul, and it falls to rack and ruin, 'cause God is coming soon. Yeah. A robot ain't no Holy Ghost. AI won't replace heaven's host. A lie so big you cannot see the chains. Yeah, you can't outrun the human race. You won't find your solace out in space. Your guilt will follow you down to your grave. Falls to rack and ruin, 'cause God is coming soon. Yeah, I like that tune. Austin continues, I'll talk to the Alberta chapter, see if they can talk to the Ontario section. Yeah, that'd be great. And agreed, the RCP is extreme ultra left, and if the revolution or state wasn't perfect, it's Stalinist. Yeah, exactly. That's the trouble. No, I mean, that's the fundamental trouble with like Trotskyist organizations. If you bring up any disagreement whatsoever, you're suddenly a Stalinist. And it's just like, oh, okay. So you can't actually have like rational discussions. Like that's the fundamental problem with Trotskyist organizations is like the moment you're like, that doesn't ring true, like that doesn't sound correct, or we actually have evidence that that's not true, then you're suddenly smeared as a Stalinist, and you're just like, oh, okay, so we're not actually interested in like historical truth. We're not actually interested in like a material analysis of what's going on. Yeah. D2, I don't know how to pronounce your name, dude. You told me how to do it before over on Twitch. D over on Twitch. I guess I'm a Stalinist. Yeah, like if you tend to point out like the whole purpose of Marxism is that we do a material analysis. That's the entire purpose, right? That's the whole pitch. Is that we take a look at history, we take a look at the material analysis, we take a look at reality, we take a look at these things, and we draw conclusions based on the evidence, based on material reality. And Trotskyists refuse to do that to Trotsky. That Trotsky is a religious icon, right? That Trotsky is elevated to the position of like a saint, and what Trotsky said is just true. And if we're not allowed to take a look at any other evidence, so we're not allowed to do anything else. Now, the break for me, I was going to a group, and they were fine enough people, but it was just interfering with my work, and I couldn't continue going to that particular group. And so they sent me to another like chapter of theirs, and I spoke to one of the people there. And it was like really, really obvious. Like this person had definitely bought into the Trotsky stuff. And like they sent me some articles. And the articles basically like the break for me was one of the articles was talking about the Indonesian genocide and essentially tried to blame the Indonesian genocide on Stalinism. And I was just like, get the fuck right out of here, man. Like that's not just delusional. That's like insanity. Like it's like completely let the American military machine, the American genocide machine, just completely off the hook. Because the truth is that like that was probably going to happen no matter what, whether it was Trotskyists or Stalinists or whatever. Like they tried to make the argument that the reason why it happened in Indonesia was because of Stalinism. And I literally was just like, okay, you guys are nuts. Like, that's an insane position to hold. Literally blaming the Indonesian people for being genocided, essentially. And I was just like, okay, bye. You cannot have rational discussions with these people. It's not actually possible. And yeah, Stalin's giant international spoon, exactly. Well, and like, I just am to a point. And it's so frustrating because it seems like they're the ones that have the best strategy for expansion, right? Like they get into the universities. And I won't be too blown away to find out that a lot of these Trotskyist groups just straight up have like Secret Service backing or something like that, right? That at the bottom of the chain, at the very end of everything, it'll be like, yeah, we were funding Trotskyist organizations to help prevent leftism from growing in the country. And I mean, proof's in the pudding. Like proof's in the pudding. New polling out. People are approving of these liberals. People are looking at these liberals and thinking to themselves, yeah, these liberals are great. 90% approval rating for the liberals, right? So like, I'm seeing more and more leftists and more people in the leftist space begin to ask the question, like, are we the problem? Like, we like to have this narrative. We like to have this narrative that says, oh, there's these big corporations and we're being propagandized and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know, man. Like, there does kind of come a point where it's like, maybe we just want it to be this way. Like maybe we're just a fan of it being this way, and it really is that simple. Austin says, I left because I read more theory and realized that they would rather sacrifice the proletarian state because it wasn't perfect than something that was better from the previous system. I mean, for me, their ideas are just bad. They just have bad ideas. Like, that's really that simple. Like the RCP before the October 7th moment, before the actual genocide, was actually against boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Like this kind of like really naked, like very obvious thing that you should be for. Like everybody should be for boycotting and divestment and sanctions against Israel. Like everybody on the planet. If you're not for that, then I think that you're a lunatic. And these Trotskyist organizations were always against that. And their argument was, oh, it hurts working people. And it's like, yeah, we know. Like it hurts the genocidal working people of Israel, the people who are pro-genocide in Israel. It hurts them. We know. That's the whole point. So they don't really like it's just sort of funny and odd how often the views of Trotskyist organizations align perfectly with the empire. And it's just sort of weird how often that happens. So, protests across America. There are protests happening. Nobody's reporting on it. Certainly not big mainstream media. Let me know if this audio is playing well for you guys. Tell me about the audio here.
Los Angeles, California right now, where a music festival is unfolding. And yes, we got to call it a music festival to ensure that the algorithm shows you this beautiful concert. Otherwise, we risk this video getting taken down. If you're seeing this video, I just want you to know that we're still out here fighting forward every single day for good music, better music, and more free music. If you are with us in that mission, then hit that follow button and stay in touch with us as we continue every day forward.
How's the audio there, guys? XD, good to see you. XD visiting China right now. How's China right now, my man? Like, I know that you were putting some stuff in the Discord. It's hot. It's hot all over, it seems like. Not getting any feedback about that audio. I don't know if I said hello to you, Long Defined. Good to see you. Like, these events are really inspiring, like, these events are really inspiring a lot of mental health difficulties. I know for me, like, I was talking about it right at the beginning, like, it's heartening to see people taking to the streets. It's heartening to see people actually getting out there. It's heartening to see people actually protesting and actually gathering. And it's possible that these protests are going to be just as big as the Occupy Wall Street protests, right? But at the same time, like, I have been predicting the rise of these sort of authoritarian Nazi movements for a long time, and it's difficult. Like, now that it's kind of here, now that we're here, it's difficult, and it's hard to watch people I care about. It's hard to watch people who are just good people, you know, trying their best in the world, having to throw down and needing to fight against this kind of inevitable rise. And like, it's quite serious what's happening. Like, this is CNN.
A significant visual of the National Guard deployment, and the increased federal law enforcement presence in the city of Washington. This is a series of 5 armored personnel carriers that have lined up here basically at the foot of the Washington Monument. The monument is about a block over my shoulder. You might be able to see it there. These guys are lined up here now. As far as where they're going tonight, whether they're going to patrol this area around the mall and the monuments or go to other neighborhoods, they are not saying. They're referring us to their public information people. We've tried to reach out to them, and they've not gotten back to us. So the specific mission of these armored personnel carriers, not clear tonight. Now, what we have been told, though, guys, is that the overall mission of the National Guard will be logistics, it will be administrative, but they will have the authority to briefly detain people.
Briefly detain people, right? Like, the militarization of America and like watching the militarization of America is just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's the realization and it's the recognition that what they're doing in Palestine is the goal. Like, that's the blueprint. That how they are taking advantage of the people of Palestine and what they've been doing across the Middle East and how they've been acting across the Middle East is the blueprint and is what their strategy is. That's how they intend to govern. And as things accelerate, as prices increase, as everything gets worse across America, their goal is to just continue clamping down and to continue militarizing and to continue making it difficult for people to live. And it gets very difficult for me to believe that they're doing anything other than just abandoning the people and the working class at an accelerated rate so that they can go off and live on like Epstein Island. Like it's just like almost impossible not to draw this conclusion that the wealthy are buying up all the land, all of the assets that matter, and while simultaneously turning everybody into permanent renters and basically saying, yeah, if you can't afford the rent, then you're homeless. And their strategy for how to deal with homelessness seems to be street sweeping with military force. And the opposition seems to be coming up from the people themselves. Seems as though there is a staunch opposition coming from the people themselves. But there doesn't seem to be much opposition coming from any political structure that really matters. And eventually there just does come a point where I have to start asking, like, is this what people want? Like, is this what people want? Do they want to be living in a society that has structured itself this way? Do they want to be living in this kind of chaotic downward spiral? Is this how people want to live their lives? And it's demoralizing. Like I feel hopeless. Not hopeless, but helpless. Like I feel like what am I supposed to do in the midst of all of this? Like I feel like I come here to talk about it. But I see lots of people talking about it now. And more people are talking about it. And everybody's trying to get their voice in, and everybody's trying to have their say. And it just seems like the problems get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and more insurmountable. Radio Halifax, good to see you. Here's an interesting little website that I found. This is protests happening across the United States. And of course, You can just click here and it goes forward day by day. So people are keeping track of all of the protests that are happening. I don't know why it's doing it this way. Hold on, guys. It's just being annoying. There we go. Like, I feel like major protests are almost not going to be enough. Like, we're getting to a point where it's going to take like some Mangione style shit. That's what it's going to take before people start to actually realize like the power structure is not trying to correct itself. It's not attempting to correct itself. It's just living in this perpetual cycle, this perpetual downward spiral. And it just feels like everybody's kind of accepted it, you know? Like I've noticed my own channel. I think people are like, my own channel is in decline. I see other leftist channels. Their numbers are in decline. The NDP here in Canada are in like a major decline. People aren't really happy with them. Like the people who vote for them, sure, but like the NDP were completely destroyed in the last election, and it's confusing. You know, like it's just confusing. I just feel so confused about it all. Like, don't we want to build a better life? Don't we want to build a better reality for ourselves? Don't we want the world to be better? And it just looks like the answer is no. You know? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all to me. Why wouldn't we want the world to be better? Why wouldn't we want food to be abundant? And why wouldn't we want people to be housed? And why wouldn't we want life to be easy for everyone? Like, why wouldn't we want these things? And like, we're caught up in this spiritual and intellectual constipation. And I don't think we're going to break from it. Like, as heartbreaking as that is to say, and as difficult as that is for me to say, it just seems like we've dedicated ourselves to it. We've dedicated ourselves to the idea that we're going to go into decline, and we're going to happily do that. And like, as long as housing prices stay high for property owners, then everything's gravy, right? Like, I don't know how to, like, how do you live in this world? You know, these last few weeks, that's what I've been really struggling with. Is like, how do you just live in this world? How do you get out of your house and have a good time? How do you talk to people? How do you have conversations? How do you find love? How do you make friends? How do you do anything? Because it just seems like everybody's living in this state of total denial and this state of delusion where the things that are happening aren't happening. And we all have to put on this like fake smile. Content, show titties, that's how. I mean, cool. Like, we literally have the American government like sweeping the streets and like rounding up homeless people and sending them into concentration camps. And it's very difficult for me to believe that like the Democrats are going to put up a big front and are really going to get in the way of it. You know? And I feel like I'm just like failing to be able to articulate anything new about it, and failing to see my role in all of this anymore. Like, what a catastrophe. Like, what a total catastrophe. That these actions are destroying people and destroying families and destroying lives and ruining people. And what makes it so barbaric and so insane is it just doesn't need to happen. Like, we could very easily create support systems that would support life. It would be easy to do. It would be simple to do. And every single time anybody says like, hey, we could create a system to help people, we could create a support system, we could create something that would actually benefit anybody, it basically all boils down to just some guy going, but they didn't earn it. Like, what the hell is wrong with us? What the hell is actually wrong with us? And like, Trump is talking about deploying the US military into Chicago and New York. Like, there is this like ongoing kind of riff that I see, that this is all just a distraction to distract from the Epstein files. But I don't think so. Like, I don't think this is a distraction from the Epstein files. I think that this is like finally the Nazis in America, the far right in America, the Christian nationalists in America. Like, this is them unfolding their vision for America. That they know that there's all of this social disorder coming. Like, these guys are always talking about like the great replacement theory, and they're always talking about how white people are being replaced, and they're always talking about how the Jews run everything, right? And here they're unfolding their strategy about what to do with it. And here they're unfolding their ideas about what to do about it. And there really comes a point where it's like there are like no takebacks moments, right? Like, there are moments where you can't really take it back, right? This article that I'm showing here, this is written by a fellow by the name of Chris Armitage. It's in Medium. And he basically points out that, hey, once things go fascist, right, they don't bounce back. Like, that's kind of the harrowing reality of all of this, you know, is that like once you militarize your cities, once you have an organization like ICE, like once you create a secret military, once you do all of these things, you know, you don't just bounce back. You don't just suddenly like elect a different person and that person suddenly starts pulling everything back. Like once the rule of law is thrown overboard and corruption becomes the way of it and is the way things are, you don't come back from it. Not without like a major military campaign, not without some kind of major military force or major military conflict. And in the United States, it's definitely going to be a civil war. It's definitely going to be civil war. Battle lines will be drawn. People will shoot guns. It's going to be a fight. Now, it's not going to be like an entrenched draw battle lines. It's going to be like scrappy urban warfare. And that's the future of what's going to happen in America. Because the real pain of what the Trump administration has done is that Trump has empowered, finally, the Nazis. That he's just opened the door and let them roll in. And now they're an organized force. And they're going to continue organizing. Cotton writes, yeah, there are 0 Democrats promising to abolish ICE or roll back the big, beautiful bill. No Democrat. Yeah, there is no going back because there is no real opposition. I mean, you guys know me. Like, the Democrats and the Republicans are allies. They work together, right? They work together. And there's all this fear. And there's all this uncertainty. And there's all this hatred. And it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. And that's what makes me so sad about it. And that's what gets me down. More than anything else. Is that people are fighting simply for the right to exist. That nobody asked to be here. We are just here. Nobody asked to be part of this reality. We just happen to be here. And all of the trouble and all of the difficulty is so that, what, like 500 guys can cosplay at being like technocrats or like gods of some kind. And we're all cool for that. Like we're all down for that. It looks like. And like we could be like life could have been simple. Life could have been simple. You know? that we all literally could be gathering every month, local communities, and just discussing like, hey, what is it that we want to do? What is it that we think is important for our local communities? What do we think we should do in order to make sure everybody's safe and make sure everything's okay? Like, why are there people begging on the streets? Why is there any of this happening? And instead of that, we have like a pedophile rapist militarizing the streets, basically going to be rounding up minority groups, already rounding up illegal aliens, Latinos, already causing huge problems for the migrant population, already disrupting and destroying local economies. With the support and backing of a large segment of the population. Like, we should be educating these people. We should be integrating these people into our societies. We should be trying our best to be stabilizing everyone's lives. We should have stable housing. We should have stable food. We should have all of these things. And it's just like we've all thrown up our hands at it. And we're just like, oh, no, that's unrealistic. It's wild. It's wild. What a strange and unusual world we live in, where like my own government, like the Gaza genocide makes no sense at all. Like, it makes no sense at all. Nothing we're doing makes any sense. Like, it barely makes sense from the position of a capitalist. Like, if you're a capitalist oligarch, like, what are we doing? How is this making any money? How is this actually making any profit for anyone? How is this actually helping anybody? Like, it's just like we're frothing at the mouth. We're frothing at the mouth. And we're allowing this like death impulse, this unhinged psychopathic worldview to just overwhelm our base senses. And we're no longer interested at all interested in helping our neighbor. Tao Raksa over on Twitch says, can we say that Russia is doing the same as Israel? And if not, why not? Because the history is different. It's a different history. It's a different idea. It's a different project. The the Palestinian genocide is essentially a colonial project and always has been. It's a naked power grab. You now have Netanyahu talking openly about the vision of Greater Israel. And so it's a naked, inherent open, expansionist, capitalist project. It's a colonial project. That's what it is. What's happened between Ukraine and Russia is a different situation. That it's one that I think the Russians were trying to avoid for a long time. That the goal there from the West, who are essentially the antagonists in this conflict, like I take the position of John Mearsheimer. I think John Mearsheimer is, and Jeffrey Sachs as well, are the ones who have articulated what's going on in Ukraine with the most clarity. That in 2014, there was a coup in Ukraine. The Russians were screaming at the top of their lungs at NATO that Western expansion towards Russia is a red line for the Russians, which makes sense the moment you understand the history of World War II and you understand the history of NATO. You're like, yeah, NATO is a terrifying organization to Russia. The NATO was created with the explicit intent to dismantle the Soviet Union. NATO had promised, like one of the caveats for the rebuilding of Germany was that NATO will not expand. And it expanded several times now. And every single time the Russians lost their shit about it, because that's very terrifying for Russia. It's terrifying that a European organization that contains a former Nazi state in it would advance militarily towards Russia. It's scary. The Nazis killed 20 million Russians. Like, it's scary. And so the Russians basically drew a line in the sand and said, look, if you get involved in Ukraine, then we will push back. We will take military action if you get involved in Ukraine. We've been taking it on the chin and trying to throw up a fuss diplomatically this entire time. Tao says, I agree, but why is it so difficult to convey this position in the West? I mean, I feel like that folds into what I've been talking about this whole time, Tao. I don't think the West is in a rational space. I think the West is clutching hold of like we're in a deeply emotional moment. This is strictly emotions, and everyone is caught up in their emotions, and nobody is even interested in listening to reason. Like that I think is really what's going on. That fear and terror is ruling the day. Westerners have lost the ability, if they ever had it, to be reasonable. Like, if you ask me, the Russians have always been reasonable about what's been going on in Ukraine. And if the West was actually capable of being reasonable, that conflict would end. Because, like, the Russians are not going to give back the land that they've taken, right? That's just not going to happen. Tal asks, is it possible to restore rational thinking to Western people, and how can it be done? Joe, good to see you, by the way, bud. I don't think so, dude. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. That's what makes this so difficult. Is that the West is on a path to self-destruction. That America is on a path towards balkanization, which is to say it's going to break apart. It's on the path towards a civil war. It can even be argued that we are already amidst that civil war. It's historically unlikely that America will recover. Like, if America as an empire does not break apart, they will be the very first empire to manage it. Tao says, as a Western person, do you feel the West is moving towards something left wing, even if it seems childish at the moment? Absolutely not. No, quite the opposite. I think that what we are looking at, like, the Nazis are coming back. It hurts my heart to say so. And I say so knowing people who live in America, rooting for people who live in America, hoping that those people will reach the conclusion that I have reached and get out of there as fast as possible. Is the West worse now than it was in the 1980s or the 1990s? Yes, considerably so. The big reason, so in the 80s and the 90s, the West, specifically America, is the unipolar power, right? The West is the strongest, it's the only superpower on the planet. Isaac, good to see you, my man. Thanks for being here. I want to pause for 1 second. I'll come back to you, Tao. And thanks guys for being here, you know. Like, I do have to point out viewership is down, which I think is normal for the summer, right? People get out and they do stuff, right? I expect viewership to come back up come fall and winter and all that. So I'm not worried about it. But I do want to thank you guys for being here, you know. It really matters to me that you're here. Because, you know, part of this journey and part of the reason why I do this is to help alleviate my own sense of alienation and loneliness through all of this. And living in these countries that are turning towards fascism and leaning and living in these countries that are experiencing these big declines. You know, when I look at the poll numbers, it's like 90% of people are in support of the liberal government. I'm like, what, are you fucking crazy? And then you talk to these people and yes, they're fucking crazy. Like, people have become unhinged. They're nuts. And so I'm so grateful that you guys are here, that we have these like-minded conversations with one another. And that someone like Tao is here asking polite questions. Is the West worse now than it was in the 80s or the 90s? Yes. And the big reason for this, Tao, is that the Americans used to be like the superpower. Do you think the socialist upheaval in Western countries was closer in the 80s or now? No, I think it's probably about the same. Like, I think the Red Scare movement and the suppression of socialist movements, like, was successful. Like, I think the assassination of Martin Luther King and the assassination of Malcolm X and like the destruction of the Black Panthers, while the Ku Klux Klan was left perfectly intact, was successful. And that those movements have really not been able to rebuild themselves. And they've not been able to rebuild themselves because of organizations like the FBI and the CIA. And that anybody that tries to rebuild anything is heavily suppressed and oppressed. And I don't think that there's going to be a change there. Like, as much as I like, as much as I've been kind of railing on the general populace, like, it is true that it's the ideas that are laying around that people will grab hold of. And the ideas of socialism and the ideas of communism and the ideas of the left generally have been more or less eliminated from the discourse. That the furthest to the left that you're allowed to be in the discourse is essentially small scale piecemeal reformism. That you have, if you want to have your voice heard politically in the country at all, you have to start by conceding that the system of capital is good and that what we need to do is negotiate with that system of capital. And now we've come to a point where the system of capital can't be negotiated with anymore. It won't negotiate, and it never will. Isaac, yeah. The Nazis are here already. Yeah. I mean, they don't call themselves Nazis, obviously, but like their goal is to strip away equal rights for everybody, right? That's their goal. And they're moving on it, and they're going to do it. Like, they're going to do it. Like, they overturned Roe v. Wade. They're going to get rid of gay marriage again. Like, they're doing it. And the big catalyst, Tao, and the thing that I've been driving towards is that the American dollar is losing its primacy. That through the in the post-World War II world, the deal that America was essentially able to make with the entire rest of the world was, if you want to do any trade, you have to trade on the dollar. That was the deal. And what that meant is that America was able to get anything exported to it, or imported to it, I should say. And they would be able to get goods imported to it in exchange for dollars, right? So the American banks could just print dollars out of nothing, because it's a fiat currency, and send those dollars to China. China became the manufacturing center and is the manufacturing center of the world. So they're able to send dollars over to China, and then China sends goods over to America. So really, America is enjoying, in the post-World War II moment, and the post-Cold War moment especially, a free lunch, essentially. Print dollars, get goods shipped in. Well, that's coming to an end. That's coming to an end. That the American dollar, because of the rise of organizations like BRICS, and BRICS is a economic alliance between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and has now expanded dramatically into what's commonly known as the global South. And so, because it exists, America is no longer able to get its free lunch. And so when it goes out into the world with its dollar, people are now saying, okay, we don't really want your dollars. And especially as we have these openly fascist moments, this open Nazism that's happening in America, and the civil war that's happening, and the political war that's happening, where Texas is trying to eliminate all the Democrats, and so California is reacting to that. Like, it's instability. The number one thing that any country wants, like, people are willing to accept a certain amount of injustice if it means that it comes with stability. A stable injustice is preferable to an unstable potential improvement. That's how most people think about it, naturally. And what's going on in America is unstable injustice with only potential for more injustice. And so people are fleeing from it. Canada is fleeing from it. And in the meantime, like, we have statements. This statement is an incredible statement. This is an incredible statement that's been made. The US Treasury Secretary just said that, the US will now treat US allies' wealth as an American sovereign wealth fund, directing them largely at the president's discretion how to use their money in order to build American factories and reshore American industries. So fundamentally, what this says is, because US capital is no longer able to exploit the global south as successfully as it has in the past, it's going to turn its eye inward. And it's going to begin treating its allies in Europe, Mexico, and Canada as places to exploit. That we're going to begin the process of colonizing ourselves. And everything we've been doing across the globe, we're going to start doing to ourselves. Tao asks another question here. Can we expect China to take action that will contribute to the global communist revolution? So the Chinese have actually been pretty upfront about their position on this. That the Chinese Communist Party feels as though it needs to consolidate its own gains and protect itself. That's essentially what Deng Xiaoping did, and was heavily criticized for. But and the Chinese position really is, every nation is going to have to find their own path to communism, and that China is, like, unfortunately, but and like, it's not an illegitimate position to hold given the weakness of communism across the globe, is that China needs to look out for China. And they're not going to funnel a whole bunch of money into big communist revolutions. Now, what China is doing is a heck of a lot of diplomacy, and they're doing diplomacy along business lines. Like, they're essentially co-opting the systems of imperial capital and inverting them and turning them back against the capitalists. And, like, trade organizations like the World Trade Organization, China is essentially following the rules of international law and upsetting the American apple cart, because the Chinese are giving, like, Africa is turning towards China in a huge and massive way, because China is essentially giving Africa a better deal. Like, China shows up to the Congo and says, hey, we want your cobalt. Can we get access to your cobalt? And the Congo says no. And so China goes, oh, okay. Well, what about it? What about this deal? What if we build all the infrastructure? What if we give you access to this port? What if we build the electrical grid? What if we take all of the infrastructure costs on to actually get this all built? Can we get access to your cobalt then? And through this back and forth negotiating, that no has steadily turned to yes over time. And China is doing it without invading anybody, without dropping bombs on anybody, without committing a genocide against anybody. They're just steadily negotiating their way through what they call win-win diplomacy. And they don't call it like a communist revolution, but they're certainly showing the world that there's a better way of doing business. They're certainly showing the world that, like, yeah, we can build up our own productive forces and we can build up our own country and we can help the countries that are around us and we can trade peacefully with the countries that are around us. And we don't need to kick in anybody's doors, and we don't need to round anybody up, and we don't need to do any of that. And so, in my view, the primary way that China is taking to contribute to a global communist revolution is just through, I'm blanking on that word, is just by believing in what they say and by being the model, right? They're not trying to impose their values on anyone. They're just showing that their values are better. Demand better world. Good to see you. We need communism ASAP. Yep. I mean, that'd be wonderful, but I think that we're in for some dark times here, my man. And I think that that's what we really need to brace for in the West, is that it's about building local power. It's about getting to know your neighbors. And I'm really guilty of this myself because I don't know that I'll be staying in Toronto too much longer, truth be told. Like, I feel like what I'm building here and what I'm getting set up for myself is essentially going to take me out of this city. And I don't think, and everybody I talk to, like the friends that I have, everybody's feeling the same. Like, I just don't think that, I don't think that there's going to be much success in the West in the future here. That we're going to experience pretty major decline. And it's, at this point, it is intentional. Like, it's an intentional decline. We could not do it. We're choosing to do it. Well, Tal Raxa with a subscription over on Twitch. That's lovely. Thank you, friend. Tal, I'll direct you to my YouTube channel. That's like the core base. The Twitch channel is like a secondary thing. But thank you. I appreciate it. Tao asks, how can we argue with liberals that China's actions in Africa are not imperialistic? I mean, I think that we're past argumentation with liberals. I don't think that we are. I don't think that we're seeing rational discourse. I don't think that what we're seeing is reasonable, especially amongst liberals. Baldy McNose here, good to see you, my man. How am I? Yeah, I'm demoralized and I'm feeling tough. Like, I'm feeling tough. Like, I'm seeing things. Oh, Ong Noing, I forgot to say hello to you. Good to see you, Ong Noing. Yeah, these are deliberate, chosen policies. Yeah. And that's what makes the Democrats so pathetic and so weak. It's because they could also have deliberate, chosen policies, but they don't. Like, their policy is to basically uphold the status quo. And now the status quo is fascism. And so that's what they're going to uphold. The best argument against the idea that China's actions in Africa are not imperialistic is that China hasn't invaded anybody. Like, it's pretty weird to say that China, what they're doing is imperialism when, okay, well then who have they invaded? Like, that's what makes the entire argument so strange, Tao, is that homicidal tendency says debt trapping isn't some sort of imperialism. All of the evidence shows that when China encounters some kind of debt situation, like what you're describing, is they forgive the debt. And that's from the World Trade Organization itself. So China's interest, like, it's really important to remember this. China's interest is not in financial domination. Like, China understands that the money, the purpose of the money is to just facilitate trade. That's the point. Like if you treat the money as a tool of measurement and as a way to facilitate trade amongst in complex organizations and complex situations, um, well then you can focus on what really matters, right? And what really matters is the goods, the cobalt, access to the mines. That's what really matters. That debt trapping is something that the IMF does. That's a Western tool of domination and control. It's not really something China has been engaging in. There was a great Atlantic article that basically ran through that whole idea that China is debt trapping people, and it just essentially concludes exactly what I just said, which is that they're not. And they're not for a very simple reason, because it's not helpful, right? It's not helpful to the people who are experiencing the debt trap, right? It slows production down, it makes things more difficult. And then it's not actually helpful for the people who want their debts repaid. In this case, it would be China, right? And this kind of goes back to an old medieval idea, right? There was this idea of a debtor's prison, right? That it used to be the case that if someone owed someone a debt, you could take them and you could throw them in prison. And debtors' prisons were done away with for a very simple reason, which is, well, if the problem is that you owe a debt, you're certainly not going to be able to pay that debt if you're wallowing away in prison, right? And so it just came to be understood that okay, we need to work something else out. And in many cases, the best thing to do is just to forgive the debt. It's just to say, okay, that the borrower wasn't able to make good on what they hoped for, but the debtor took a risk that didn't pay out. And so both are somewhat at fault, and so both need to come to some kind of agreement. And that's essentially how China operates in Africa. And I'm actually of the opinion that China has done it with intention. Like, I think China has made certain deals with the understanding that they wouldn't get that money back. I think that they went into a lot of different organizations and a lot of different things with the full knowledge that they're not going to see that money again, because the money's not the point, right? And like, I see this over and over and over again with Western outlets and Westerners generally, is that in the West, money is a god. We worship money. And if we worship money, and if money is the point, then we make all kinds of foolish ideas and all kinds of foolish conclusions, and come up with all kinds of bad policies and bad ideas. And I see it pretty much anytime I read an article from like The Economist or the Financial Times written about China. It's all just 100% like that. It's just 100% like, oh, sure, China is making free infinite energy for everyone forever, but who's going to make any money? Like, it's like that. And it's backwards. Like, we have become economically backward, where our focus is not actually on production and goods. It's about scraps of paper we ourselves are responsible for printing. Doesn't make any sense. It's completely backwards. And we're paying for it. We're paying for it in big, serious ways. Joe writes, it saddens me how ignorant Westerners are on the subject of the monetary system. Yeah, that's completely intentional. Like, it's completely intentional. It's the more I look at it and the more I read on it and the more I see it, the more I'm just like, yeah, this was completely done on purpose. That, like, I've talked about this before, but it's worth talking about. Like, the existence of business schools, right? Just the existence of business schools. Like, why should there be a business school? Why aren't business schools just part of an economics program, right? Like, why do you have an economics class and then a business class? It doesn't actually make any sense. Shouldn't those be the same? But what you have is that the owners of the system, the capitalists, when they were setting it all up, they understood that they can't really teach people what capitalism is and how it operates in like a naked kind of a way, right? Because if you did that, you would end up essentially making a whole bunch of Marxists, right? That if you were to teach what capitalism actually is, you'd be teaching Marxism. And they can't have that. And so what you do is you teach a religious ideology called economics. You have priests like Milton Friedman going around talking about this religious ideology of what capitalism is. It completely has no reflection in the real world. It's just a religious ideology to keep people confused about what's actually going on. It allows you to make outlandish claims that have no basis in reality whatsoever. Trickle-down economics is a good example of this, voodoo economics. But you still need people to like manage your businesses, right? And so you have a priest class, and the role of the priest class is to justify the existence of capital. And then you have business schools, and the role of the business school is to teach people how to is just to teach people how to run factories and run a Walmart, essentially. Baldy McNose here with a $2 donation. Rip Al Sharif, also F National Post. Yeah, absolutely, dude. Is that a reference to the journalists that were killed in Israel? 6 journalists that were killed in Israel? Good old Israel. Yeah. Grand Designs Enjoyer over on Twitch. Can you consider reacting to this later? I don't click on links in the chat for fairly obvious reasons. I don't really have a way to pull that from Twitch onto my stream. So that's going to be a no, my man. Thanks for being here, though, bud. Yeah. Trump replaced the PBS with PragerU. Yeah, that's not a sign of propaganda, isn't it? Yeah, it's hard to believe that that's actually going to happen. Like, it really is. It's really difficult to believe that, like, PBS is going to shut down, like Sesame Street. Like, they're going to shut down Sesame Street, and they're going to replace it with, like, pretty naked Nazi propaganda. Like, pretty naked Nazi propaganda. Like, that's that's something that's just really tough. That's like a really tough pill to swallow. That millions of American children are going to be inundated with this brutal, ahistorical, like Nazi propaganda. Like teaching kids that slavery was not a big deal, better than being killed. Grand Designs and Joiner says, "Oh, I understand. Then can you search the title of the video on YouTube? Title of the video by History Hustle." I mean, already, History Hustle. Okay. Why were the Soviets so cruel in East Prussia during World War II? Oh, I don't need to watch a video to talk about that, my man. Like, what often happens when you have kind of hacks, essentially, like this History Hustle channel, what they do is that they omit the Nazis. And once you do that, you can basically say whatever you like, right? That in a vacuum, if you were to just take what the Soviets did in a moral vacuum, you could sit there and be like, oh goodness, oh gracious me. And pretty much anytime I encounter somebody who considers themselves an anti-communist or an anti-Soviet or something like that, that's basically what they're doing. That they take one very specific perspective, one very specific side, and then they basically omit the importance of the Nazis. Okay, well, if they don't omit the Nazi atrocities after entering USSR territory, what do you need? Why do I need to react to that then? Because it's fully understandable. Like the Nazis were very serious, right? Like what's there to respond to? That if there was a force that was rounding up people in my country, throwing women and children into churches and burning them alive, ethnically cleansing, literally creating concentration camps of communists, I would consider them to be a threat. And I would act in extremely strong ways against that. And so, if the author of this video is including the Nazis, then he's answering his own question, isn't he? Like, why were the Soviets so cruel in East Prussia during World War II? Because they were fighting Nazis. Like, I've never really understood why this is controversial and why people struggle with this so much, or why this, like the title of the article itself, the title of the piece itself, puts the onus on the Soviets, right? Why were the Soviets so cruel in East Prussia? Maybe because they were fighting Nazis. And and this is the thing I keep circling back on, and I keep telling, and it's like as things get more dramatic and more difficult here in the West, we're going to need to get more dramatic. Cademan, first time chatter, says, "What the hell is that?" I assume you're responding to the shot that I've got up here about PragerU replacing PBS. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to believe. It's like we're a parody of ourselves. Like we're a parody of a rational civilization. Like we're no longer really interested in being reasonable or rational. We're so clearly disconnecting from reality. We're so clearly disconnecting from uh, being a serious people. And the rest of the world has noticed. And it's creating this downward spiral for us that we're not going to be able to get out of. It's going to be like a vortex. Yeah, grand designs, I just think you're hung up on something that is like pretty small scale in the end of it all. Like, I don't actually care this much about this subject. Like, yeah, are you going to be able to find Soviet people who did bad things during World War II? Sure. Like, World War II was a fucking crazy atrocity. But basically, what you're doing is just armchair quarterbacking, right? Who was responsible for creating the conditions of World War II? Like, yeah, you're gonna find some Soviets, and you're gonna find some officers, and you're gonna find some soldiers, and you're gonna find some people who did some crazy shit, for sure. Like, for sure. Who was responsible for creating the conditions of World War II? And like, why are you so hyper fixated on the actions that happened in like an isolated section of World War II instead of asking yourself who's responsible for creating the conditions of World War II? Like, all you'll really end up proving is that if you create hell, you get devils. And that's just correct. Cade Bond says, as a conservative, I find that Brian shows as outlandish, hard to believe in, and outright wrong. I don't think I understand your comment, Cade Bond. I'm sorry. I think autocorrect probably did you wrong on that one. So if you'd like to re-comment on that, I'll definitely talk back to it. Hope you're doing well out there. Oh yeah, like I would encourage you, Caedmon, to um, start moving away from conservatism. That we're seeing what the consequences of conservatism look like now, and that conservatism as a ideology or as an idea, um, it doesn't really have a leg to stand on any longer, which is unfortunate, but true. That we can't actually maintain a situation where private property is maintained. I mean, how can I say that? Like, we're looking at a highly conservative government. Like, these are arch conservatives leaning towards Nazis at this point. And like, you look at their actions and you look at what they're doing, right? And the idea that uh, that wasn't going to happen. I mean, this is the road that we've been on for a long time. Like, you're new here, so you haven't actually seen me talk about it for 5 years. And I've been talking about this since I was in university. Like, this has been the trajectory that the United States has been on. And this is where the conservatives in America have been taking America for decades. For decades. And now we're entering a place where we're watching the Nazis come back. Like, they're militarizing your cities. They're literally purging your cities. Yeah, okay. So you're from Sweden and not the United States. Okay. Well, take a look at what's going on in America. That's the result of conservatism. Like, that's just the hard basement bottom of it. And if you'd like to make an argument for conservatism, we can have a conversation about it. You can argue why you feel conservatism is good. You can go ahead with that. But I have the clearest possible example to point to for why conservatism fails, why it doesn't work, why it's a bad idea, and it's happening in America right now. And it for sure is going to come for your country. Like, for sure. It's a total guarantee. Grand Designs Enjoyer says, do you ever read think tank policy papers on stream? Yeah, I will. Sort of depends on what it is. Like, I don't really care what PragerU has to say. Sometimes I'll do that to, like, make fun of them because they're so obviously Nazis. And I'm pretty skeptical of think tanks generally, because think tanks are usually billionaire funded. They usually have a bias. Caedmon says think tank. Think tank is just like a group of like-minded individuals who come together to create policy that they hope will be adopted by the government. So, like Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is a think tank. And it's just like, a group of capitalists that come together to create public policy that they then hope will be adopted. Usually they're lunatics, because usually the think tanks are made up of capitalists, and capitalists, especially in this modern era, are essentially as detached from reality as it gets and have become just completely unhinged. The Hawkish Hudson Institute launched a paper on post-CCP China. I mean, China is ruled by the CCP currently, so it's not really a thing. It's just sort of a fantasy piece then. Don't most ideologies have similar think tanks? Not really. It comes down to finances and money, right? Like, the left generally doesn't have the money to be able to make like a think tank. And so the left can't really buy a building, right? We can't have like an institute, right? We can't create this sort of veneer of credibility simply by the force of economic power. And the left is strong in Europe. The left exists in Europe, I'll say. That there is like leftist organizations that exist in Europe. I'd say that to make the claim that the left is strong in Europe it would not be something that I would take very seriously. Like, the left exists in Europe. But like pretty much in the UK, there's just no left. Like, it doesn't really exist. Germany, like the second largest party is literally a Nazi party in Germany. You have all kinds of crazy shit happening in Germany right now, in fact. So, yeah, no, there's no left in the UK. You have the ruling class, which is the Tories, right? And the Tories are literally the last prime minister was a Goldman Sachs executive. Isn't the left running UK? No. No. And then you have the Labour Party, which theoretically is supposed to be the left party, but they're not. Like, the dynamic that exists, the Labour is not left. Like, the dynamic that exists pretty much across the entire Western world. So, Caedmon, let me explain it. If they aren't left, then what are they? So this is what's going on pretty much across the entire Western world. is that you have two parties. It's usually it's essentially usually two parties. Right? That's true in Canada, the United States, and across Europe. And party one, right, is your right wing party. So like Republicans, conservatives, Tories. And the goal of the right wing parties is to destroy everything for the benefit of capital. That's the goal of right wing parties across the Western world, is to privatize everything, is to grind up social services, is to defund any public good, any public service, and make sure that wealthy robber barons essentially control everything. So that's party one, and they usually don't get a whole lot of support from the populace because their policies are so devastatingly bad. But they can garner about 30% of the vote usually, because they can convince a large enough section of the populace that it's in their benefit to turn on other sections of the populace, usually immigrants, right? People in minority positions, the poor, right? People are getting handouts. I don't want my government taxes to go to people who are lazy, that kind of thing. And then their opposition, right, is usually like the Liberals or Labor or somebody on who traditionally you would call, quote unquote, the left, right? But their role in this is essentially to operate as a release valve for capital. That, like the conservatives, the liberals agree that capitalism is the appropriate system and that things are fundamentally fine, but that we should respond to the demands of the populace by creating a release valve of some kind. And so you end up with a party that takes power because of the brutality of the conservatives, right, and the brutality of the Tories. You end up with a party in power that offers essentially nothing, except some small, tiny piecemeal reform of like, we're going to increase education spending by 0.5% over 4 years, that kind of thing. So things are fundamentally the same, where the system of capital is what's in power and the system of capital is what's in control. It's just not in a total state of complete decline. And so then what happens is that because liberals are fundamentally pro-capitalist and anti-worker, just like all political parties across Europe, really, and the Western world generally, eventually the populace begins to get dissatisfied with them and begins to see their flaws. So the clearest one was this last election, what happened with Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. That Kamala Harris was committing a genocide, right? Like the Palestinian genocide was happening. The Palestinian genocide was happening on Kamala Harris's watch, and that lost her a lot of support. And so it's this dissatisfaction with a group that kind of cosplays as being on the left and sort of pretends to be on the left, when really their interest is in maintaining the status quo on behalf of capitalists. That organizations like BlackRock, JP Diamond, the Bank of America, right? Big giant capitalist organizations. These are who these quote unquote leftists work for. Labor works on behalf of like the Bank of England. It doesn't work on behalf of the working people. The policies it puts forward are not a benefit to the people living in the country. They are a benefit strictly and only to the capitalist landlord class. And so the game that these capitalists play in the political system is you elect a party like Labor to maintain the status quo, essentially, keep things as they are, make sure that the capitalists keep making money, make sure that landlords are untouched, make sure that everybody is essentially left alone as a ruling class, which is what the capitalists are. They operate by the principle of the dictatorship of capital. And then once the populace becomes dissatisfied with that, then you bring in your conservatives. And the conservatives are the stick, right? So the conservatives come in and make everything worse for everybody and basically beat the shit out of everybody. You're seeing that happening in America pretty nakedly. They reduce social services. They make life harder for everybody. They strip away social security. They attack the poor, attack the vulnerable, attack the elderly. It's pretty standard behavior. And they'll do that until that becomes intolerable. And so the populace will accept a return to the status quo liberals. And so you end up with this, what I call a ratchet effect, right? And that's 2 steps forward, right? 1 step back, right? Click, 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 click. And you just keep passing the ball back and forth between 2 capitalist parties, so that you have this constant entropy back down towards the natural position of capitalism, which is slavery. Richard, good to see you, my man. The left are bourgeoisie capitalists with welfare. Yeah. Like, there was a time in the history of the nation where conservatives were willing to be rational and to make rational choices for the benefit of the people. That did exist for a very brief period of time, but that's been gone for decades. So, yeah, the Democrats, U.S. and Labor UK are not the left; they are the fake left. Yeah, they're controlled dissent, really. Cadebon says, what do you focus on the most at the moment except Trump whereabouts? What do I focus on the most? I mean, I generally focus on what I consider to be like the biggest sign of the decline of the West. Like, that's what this channel is about, and has always been about. That the West is in a pretty major decline. And I pride myself on the idea that I stay open to respond to people like yourself, that you come in with a question and I feel like I have an answer, because I like to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the world. I like to pay attention to the economics, and I like to pay attention to the like the behind the scenes stuff that most people don't really pay any attention to. And so when someone like yourself comes in and asks questions about the nature of the system that they operate in, I try to give a alternative perspective, because I feel like the perspective that I have is not one that often gets voice, which is that the core problem of all Western society is the relationship between labor and capital. That there's a small group of pedophilic rapists and psychopaths who have seized control of the means of production, the ability to produce things in our countries, and are leading us down the path to our own destruction. And what we need to do as a people, in all seriousness, is completely remove them from power. Not negotiate with them, not discuss them, not debate them, literally strip them of all their power, all of their assets, everything they have, because they are destroying us. And at this point, I say that they're doing it intentionally. They know what they're doing. I don't think I understand your comment, Caedmon. Sorry. Isaac said the U.S. put a $50 million bounty on the head of Maduro, and Canada voted in favor of the Organization of American States. Yeah, I mean, as the American empire begins to fall into itself and collapse, don't be too surprised to see more action get taken on South America. I think that that's something that we should be prepared for. Like a full-scale invasion of Venezuela is not off the table. And I think that Trump has even said so. Like, Trump has said things like, I don't know what we're doing in the Middle East. Like, why are we spending all this money and time on the Middle East? Like, Venezuela's in our backyard. And Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. So I think that the future, and like all of this talk about annexing Canada and annexing Greenland and all this talk about like the future of the United States is going to be a retreat into its own hemisphere, and the way that it's going to operate in its own hemisphere is the way that it has operated in the world, in the rest of the world. It's not going to be much different. And we're seeing that with Trump taking over DC and threatening to take over other cities. We're seeing this increase in fascist rhetoric and this increase in terror-based diplomacy, because that's what America has always done. It's just happening to its own citizens now. And it breaks my heart to see. It breaks my heart to see. It breaks my heart to know that there are people who I care about who are struggling through that. And it's pointless. It's a pointless struggle. It doesn't need to exist. It shouldn't exist. That everyone deserves food and shelter. Everyone deserves safety. Everyone deserves an education. Everyone deserves health care. I don't consider these to be controversial statements at all. I don't even consider these to be political statements. I consider them to be base humanism. That the fact that we're not having conversations about how to best deliver those things to the public, and instead having conversations about whether or not people do deserve food and shelter, that shows the deep rot of the West. And while it's horrifying and will be horrible to see and will be horrible to be a part of, I think the West deserves to collapse, and that it needs to collapse, that it needs to decline. Caedmon writes, it's a bit of a pivot here, Caedmon, but what you don't understand first, the Allies put on hefty, unrealistic war debt, yeah, mostly because the French wanted to punish Germany. That's right. And then they occupied the entire Ruhr area and worsened Germany's economic situation. That's part of Hitler's success. Yeah, the real declining economic success. I mean, let's be really clear. World War One and World War Two were capitalist wars. That anytime it's so funny that people come in here and try to pin things on the Soviets when like the two greatest atrocities that have happened in that happened last century were capitalist wars. Like World War One and World War Two were capitalist wars, and they happened largely in order to protect capital. And this is what kind of puts me in a state of sadness and despair almost, that like we know what these capitalists are willing to do. Like we know what capitalists are willing to do. We have World War One and World War Two as evidence for what capitalists are willing to do. And Hitler's success was because he was funded by industrialists, that he was backed by capital in order to convince large enough sections of the public to support him, to give his regime a certain degree of credibility politically. And part of that, of course, is that huge sections of the German working class. Cade Bond says, I think it is a tricky historical question who to blame for World War One. I don't think so. I think that it was the capitalists that basically World War One. I do think it's fair to say that World War One got out of hand. That like the way World War One started is the way that most capitalist war started before, which is someone gets assassinated or some kind of political thing happens, and then the banners are raised, and then there's like been a series of agreements that have been made before the event occurred. It just before World War One, war was in a way, I don't know how to say this properly without, but it was cleaner. There was a structure to it that made a type of sense, which is to say, troops would march into a field, they would line up, there would be shots fired, right? You're talking about like muskets, right? Like you're talking about like pretty low grade, like maybe cannons and stuff. Like it's not to say that people didn't die. It's not to say that there weren't horrors involved in it, obviously. All of these capitalist wars are horrible for the working class, and all of them should be done away with. But the fighting itself usually lasted like a couple of days, right? Like everybody came to the field, and then the fighting lasted a very short period of time. A winner is declared, and then oftentimes the field that they're fighting over is simply ransomed. Right? It's just ransomed back to whoever, and so at the end of the day, the whole war is fought so that one capitalist has to pay another capitalist something, and for the land that they fought over, right? And so that's the nature of capitalist wars leading up to World War One. The thing that changed in World War One was the Gatling gun. That it was the war was fought over the same basic principles that capitalists always fought wars over, which is just sort of petty rivalries and nonsense, and also a co-opting of the working class, right? Trying to get the working class, like you just have people laying about, as they called it. They would just be like, oh, you just have all these old You just have all these young men. Let's have a war, right? We could just have a war and get these young men something to do so that they're not, plotting against us, the capitalists. It's just that what happened in World War I is that new technologies started to be invented. War started to be industrialized. And the Gatling gun is the big one. And we actually have journals. We actually have diaries from generals during that period of time, where they would receive reports about how many men were killed by these Gatling guns. And they would say, well, just send more men. It can't kill them all. And the answer to that was, yeah, it goddamn could. Yeah, the Gatling gun goddamn could. And you just have these clueless generals and these clueless capitalists who don't fully understand what's happened and what's changed technologically in warfare, where if your strategy is to line up a bunch of red coats in front of a Gatling gun, well, they're just going to get mowed down. And so the response to the Gatling gun is trench warfare. And then the response to trench warfare is aerial bombardment and artillery fire, right? Artillery fire first, aerial bombardment comes later. And so what ends up being historically a very short scuffle, right, where the longest part of the fighting is actually getting to the fight, right? Because your men are marching or perhaps are on horseback, right? Or being pulled by ox and cart, right? That's like the longest part of the war, of the fight, is getting to the fight and then getting home from the fight. The fight itself doesn't take that much time. Well, in World War I, that all changed. That now the fight takes years. Now the fight takes a long goddamn time. And you lose so many resources. You lose so many men. You lose so much to gain a piece of territory that when you gain the piece of territory, there is absolutely no goddamn way you're ransoming it back. Like it used to be that you would claim a piece of territory and you would just ransom it back. You would snake a piece of France, right? You would get a piece of Spain, right? You'd get a piece of something. And then everybody would just be like, okay, cool, I'll give you 1,000 gold pieces for that piece of land back. Yeah, great. It's and it wasn't unusual to just take the land, but it was more common to ransom it back. Not after World War II, not after World War I. Once you got that piece of land, you spent so much to get that piece of land, you kept it. You kept it. And you knew that you weren't going to lose it. And so who's to blame for World War I? The capitalists. Because World War I is what happened when the capitalist sort of theory of warfare interacted with industrialized warfare. That there's your capitalist innovation, including like mustard gas and like chemical warfare, right? Chlorine. John, good to see you. JT, good to see you. And of course, because of the absolutely horrible outcome of World War I, World War I is a catastrophe. World War I is really like the end of the credibility of many institutions across Europe. Like the Catholic Church lost a lot of credibility in World War I. Most monarchies lost a lot of credibility in World War I. There's a huge art movement that goes across Europe called Dadaism, where their goal is to essentially render these old sacred institutions absurd because they no longer have any credibility. Like, who would want to follow a monarch that allowed World War One to occur, right? And and World War One happens because capitalists are stupid, and that's just the truth. Capitalists are not intelligent. They blundered into it. They dundered their way through it, and then when they got to the other side of it, they scapegoat the loser, and that's Germany. But Germany is the loser of World War One, and so they saddle it with economic debt that they know they can't pay back. Which, of course, leads to uh, uh, because all of these institutions, because the monarchs and because the churches are losing credibility, you actually have a huge upswell of communism. Right? Karl Marx is writing around this time. And so you have this huge upswell of communism happening. Uh, most communists, including Lenin, believed that the communist revolution was going to happen first in Germany. That's how entrenched communist ideas were in Germany. That people were so disillusioned with capitalists and with the church and with the monarchs and with all of these institutions that they were just seizing the means of production. Like they weren't fucking around. Like we have statements made in the parliaments of these countries where they're like, we can't really do anything about this. These peasants are just rising up and they're seizing the means of production and they're taking them away from their capitalist owners and they're running them themselves. This is happening across Germany. It's happening across Italy. It's why the first concentration camps were communist concentration camps, because the communists were the natural enemy and still are the natural enemy of capitalists. That the capitalists needed to rally and they needed to find a way to push back against this upswell of communist power and this communist revolution that was coming. And the answer that they found was Hitler and Mussolini. And this, of course, leads to World War II. And there's plenty of people who have pointed out that if Hitler had have just committed the Holocaust, purged his own country of communists, maybe done a little bit of warring, taken over France, right? If he had not invaded the Soviet Union, right? Like if Hitler had basically just said, okay, cool, this is enough. We don't need to also invade the Soviet Union. I think that Germans would probably think fairly well of Adolf Hitler. I think the Germans would probably think on Adolf Hitler with a great deal of positivity. Probably describe him as a good German leader. Yeah, oddity. Adolf Thatcher. Yeah, like all of the economic ideas of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were adopted by Thatcher and by the neoliberals, right? They just sort of rebranded it. These are tough days that we're heading towards, guys. I feel it. I feel it. These are dark days. And these dark days are going to require a lot of solidarity. I recommend getting to know your neighbors. I think I'm going to close this one down. I hope you guys are all doing well out there, man. It's tough. These are tough days. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.